evaluate from pi over 18 to pi over 6 the integral of sine of 3x times the sine of 6x. In order to perform this integral, what we need is an identity. And the identity we need is going to be the one that will trade in sine mx times sine nx. And it has to do with the angle sum and the angle subtraction formulas put together. And here's what it is. So we take the two multipliers and subtract them. And then we take the two multipliers and add them. And they become the multiplier on cosine. So we'll have the cosine so playing the role of m is 3, playing the role of n is 6. So we get 3 minus 6 and 3 plus 6. So we're talking about the cosine of negative 3x minus, the formula has a minus in it there, the cosine of 9x. Okay. And we can integrate both of these. Now, whenever you see a negative inside of a cosine, remember the identity or the property of cosine that it is an even function. When you replace the input by the opposite of it, what you end up with is just the function itself. The cosine of negative x is the cosine of x. And so this cosine of negative 3x will just be the cosine of 3x. Okay. We need the antiderivative. So we need to evaluate this antiderivative. What function would have cosine of 3x as its derivative? It's going to be 1/3 the sine of 3x. And 1/9 the sine of 9x. And so we need to evaluate it pi over 6 and pi over 18. 3 times pi over 6 is pi over 2. 9 times pi over 6 is 3 pi over 2. These guys cancel. And then 3 times pi over 18 is pi over 6. And 9 times pi over 18 is pi over 2. So we'll have the sine of pi over 2 minus 1/3 the sine of pi over 2 minus 1/9 the sine of 3 pi over 2. Upper limit. And then we have our lower limit. The 1/2 is on the outside here. Both of these guys. We plug in pi over 18 and we get the pi over 6 and the pi over 2. 1/3 of sine of pi over 6, 1/9 of sine of pi over 2. Let's go to the next slide and finish this off. And so we need to figure out these. Well, sine of pi over 2 shows up twice. And then we have sine of 3 pi over 2 and the sine of pi over 6. So we'll go get these quantities. What they are is that the sine of pi over 2 is definitely a 1. So these guys become 1s. The sine of 3 pi over 2 is a -1. And the sine of pi over 6 is a 1/2. That works out fine. We end up with a 1/3 plus a 9th. We'll change it in a second. And then we'll have a 6th, because it's a 1/3 times a 1/2, minus a 9th. So a 1/3 plus a 9th, a 6th minus a 9th, upper limit minus lower limit, so we have the subtraction sign in between. Now what we can do is these 1/9ths will double up. It's a 1/3 plus this 1/9 plus this other 1/9 will be plus 2/9, and then the minus 1/6. Common denominator is 18. We'd have to multiply by 6 in the first fraction, 3 in the second fraction, 2 in the third fraction. 6 take away 3 is 3. 3 plus 4 is 7. So we have 7 over 18, but then the 1/2 comes from the formula, the identity that we had in the beginning. So we have 1/2 of 7/18, or 7 over 36. That would be the answer to the question.